Hello everybody, it's Jamie here with FLA Tutoring, and today we're going to be talking about the multiplication and division of negative numbers. If you haven't already seen the video on negative and positive numbers and PEMDAS, please go ahead and check that out so you can get up to speed. When we're dealing with the multiplication and division of negative numbers, the key is whether or not the amount of signs we have are even or odd. What does that mean? It means that if we have a negative sign on a number, like -1, we have to see whether or not the sign count is even or odd to know whether or not the final product or division quotient will end up having a positive and negative number. So, for example, if we had -1 times a -1, we have two negative signs. Well, two negative signs is even. And if you're not familiar, forgot what even meant, it just means that the number is divisible by 2 into a whole number, because 2, 4, 6, or 8, any of these guys could be divided by 2. So in this case, we have 2. 2 can be divided by 2. That means that this becomes positive. It becomes a positive 1. If it was odd, if we had a -1 times a -1 times a -1, that's going to give us, as we can count here, a -1. Why? Because it's odd. We have 1 sign, 2 sign, 3 signs. Look at that. 1, 2, 3. 3 signs. This number is odd. It is not evenly divisible by 2 into a whole number. If we think of that like 1, 3, 5, and 7. And if we were actually to do the multiplication there on it, we would look first at the -1 here, the -1 here, and the -1 here. If we multiply these two, we'd be like, okay, -1, that's 1 and 2. That's 1 and 2. Oh, wait, that's even, right? Remember from before, if we have 2 signs, it's even. So that becomes a positive 1. If we then took this positive 1, multiplied by the -1, that's going to give us what? A -1. Why? There's 1 sign here. 1 is odd. And so if we multiply this out stage by stage, we can see how it becomes a negative or positive number based on the amount of times we're multiplying each part. And that is also key if we're doing division. If we had a -1 over a -2, well, that's 1, that's 2. Okay, it's even, right? Even. So that becomes positive. Positive 1 over 2. If we had -5 over -6, we have two of these guys. That's even. Again, that becomes positive 5 over 6. Well, what happens if we have multiples of those negatives? All right, what if we had a -1 over a -1 over -2? Well, that's 1 sign, 2 sign, 3 signs. There's 3 negative signs. It's odd. If it's odd, what's that going to tell us? We're going to have a negative outcome. Doing the math on this, if you're not familiar, when you divide a number by a fraction, it becomes a reciprocal. Reciprocal means you flip this guy around and they become, the reverse of what they look like. So it's like saying as if you took this and you said it -2 over -1 times 1. You can see the other videos related to that, multiplying fractions, if you want to refresh yourself on that concept. But if we multiply it here, again, we see there's the negative, there's a negative, there's a negative. All right, we have 3 negative signs. Well, if we did this piece by piece, and we said, okay, that's negative, that becomes a positive. And here, 2 over 1 is 2. It's like saying -1 times 2. Well, we have 1 negative sign. That's odd. That's 1 equals odd. That's a 1 single number. So -1 times positive 2 gives us -2. And so just like that, you can quickly see that when you're counting up these signs as you proceed through the problem, it is very important because the difference can be a whole different outcome in your equation. If you don't get that sign right, when you go to use that in another part of the equation, your answer could be totally wrong. So go ahead and practice with that. Start playing around with positive or negative numbers, depending on how many signs you have, whether it's an even number or odd number of those negatives, you will get an answer that will be positive or negative. Thanks so much. Take care.